Um, this time I'm going to hide behind the, usually, if those of you have been here before, I pace with the mic, so I'm going to try to hold still back here so I can do a PowerPoint presentation. How many of you been here before to hear me speak? Just a few. Okay. So I did this because I thought if people come before, they don't want to hear the same thing again and again. So this will be new, but it's still got a lot of the same. Instead of talking so much about my personal life, I'm going to talk a lot about polygamy itself, where, why, when, what, who, those kinds of things. So some of the history and some of my history. And so it will be in there. After this, I've got books. These are my books, and they've been out for 3 or 4 years, and I have some left in my garage. I sold thousands, and they're still online, but I don't want them sitting in my garage. I'd rather you read them. So afterwards, feel free to take one home with you, and take one if you know somebody else who would want one. Don't take them to throw them in the garbage, though. I've had some of the polygamous people grab them up and hurry up and throw them in the garbage after they left. So how many of you are with me that sometimes aging gets really tough? And anybody? It's like, and when my grandkids say, "Oh, Grandma, I think you're like 120, or whatever it is," or "Grandma, what's this?" and "What's this?" and all these things I don't want to hear, but they're so honest. And so I've decided I've got to laugh about it because I don't want to cry about it. So everything I'm trying to continuously make fun and laugh and have fun in my life. And so I wanted to share this one with you. So I called my doctor and asked him if, with all these issues, is it okay for me to exercise? And he goes, "Well, of course it is." And I said, "Well, I thought so. I just want to be safe, want to be sure." So I joined a senior exercise class, aerobic class, and where you have to really move, but it was senior stuff. So I wiggled, and I jumped up and down, and I gyrated, and I did everything. By the time I got my leotards on, the class was over. So anyway, that's my fun start. I'm glad you're here. Thank you for being here. And hopefully this is beneficial and that I keep talking loud enough. This is not me. My voice is usually right here. But I'll try. If you don't hear me, then raise your hand again to tell me my voice has gone way back down. I'm a product of 6 generations of polygamy on my father's side. He was, let me make sure I can get this going before I start. Yep, we're good. All right. So my father's, clear back 6 generations. I thought it was 7. So I keep finding out more and more and learning more and more as I go, every year and every day. One of my cousins who does genealogy said, "Kristyn," and he drew it out for me. Because my other brother who does genealogy had told me it was 7, and I just believed him. So this man said 6, and here's how. So 6 generations, that grandfather knew Joseph Smith personally and believed in plural marriage and lived plural marriage. And all but one of the grandfathers, down to me, lived plural marriage. So it's consistently in our blood and in our belief system. It was in mine, not anymore. But the beginning was that as all of you who know, who may be LDS, that the LDS Church did away with plural marriage a long time ago. But in the D&C, in Doctrine and Covenants, Joseph Smith, where section 132 has a revelation where polygamy will be lived or you will be destroyed. And I don't know if any of you have ever taken time to read it. If you want to, all the way through, you'll see why all these fundamentalists hang on to that for dear life. Those generations said, this is the way it is, this is the way it is, this is the way it is, even though the LDS Church voted to do away with it and did away with that part. But I have to say that President John Taylor of the LDS Church had, what they claim was that and alleged that he had this, what we used to call 8-hour meeting. And the 8-hour meeting was that he was supposed to do away with polygamy legally. Government was coming down on Utah to make them end plural marriage, stop it, or they were even threatening to take away land and property and everything else from them if they didn't end plural marriage, for good reasons. And you can read and learn more of that, and you'll hear some more there. But he said, no way, and according to this 8-hour meeting, he went and prayed to the Lord that he should, whether this should happen or not, whether he should vote to do this. And he said, I would rather, according to what I grew up with, so I'm not saying this is factual. The LDS Church has proven in their heads it's wrong, and all the fundamentalists have proven in their heads that it's right. You know how those are the stories, wherever you hear them from. So according to what I grew up with is, John Taylor says, I would rather have my arm severed than to sign that manifesto, to ever do away with plural marriage. And so he continued to live it, went into hiding to live it. The LDS Church, was it Canon? All of a sudden I'm forgetting. I think the next president, and I apologize because I should have, remember? Was it? There you go. Yeah, Woodruff, President Woodruff. So he was the one who ended up signing it. John Taylor continued to perform plural marriages outside of the LDS Church. Some of the leaders in the LDS Church knew and sanctioned the marriages after that. My grandparents, these are my father's parents, they were actually married in Mexico by one of the main authorities. I'm trying to think how he fit in. Oh, it says right here, first counselor in the presidency. So he was married 10, 20 years after the manifesto, after the church. And so privately, this is going on and on and on and on. And all of these people are believing that they have to do this or they will be destroyed. They won't be saved in heaven. They won't get to the celestial kingdom. This is the main reason for fundamental Mormon. Well, some people hate when you say that, but I based it on the original Mormon belief that polygamy was the right thing to do. So my parents married in the Logan Temple. They fell in love, and, for love at first sight kind of thing. They saw each other at church. They were both members of the LDS Church and fell in love with each other. And Dad came back from his work and wooed my mom some more and asked her to marry him. And then she took him to meet his father's family who were living plural marriage. And she was like blown away and like, what is this? We're supposed to not be living this anymore. But my father converted her. And that's why I said the beginning of her miserable happiness. My mother was his first out of 13 wives. And she believed with all her heart that this is what she was supposed to do. And she was very happy thinking she was doing what God wanted her to do, and very miserable doing it. And so that's why that seems to fit all of us women who live plural marriage, is miserable happiness, the smiles on her face, because we believe we're doing what's right and we're getting there and God's condoning everything that we do and say. And those of you who didn't, sorry, you aren't making it. So we are, you're not. In 1945 was one of people, this is one of my parts I hate the most, is when people call these things raids. In a sense, you might call it that. Police went and gathered up people, and they went into my Uncle Ruland's home, and I'll show a picture of him in a few minutes. They went to his home and gathered up people and books and scared them to death. It really is terrifying. But the intent was to stop something that was illegal, to protect children, child bride marriages, and to end plural marriage, because all of the studies and research, even way back, everybody knows it's been illegal in the United States forever and for good purposes. And anyway, I get off on my little tangents before I'm ready to. This was a picture, and you can't see faces, that's okay. But men were released because they had signed a document. So my father-in-law and my uncle were arrested. And my father-in-law, I found out later from somebody who did research and did a documentary paper and her thesis on what she called the 1953 police action. I was 1 year old. I was a baby, almost a year old. And that's when they call it a raid that they did on Short Creek, on Colorado City. But as she's done this, and as we found, I hate and despise the word raid, because the intention behind it is to protect the children, to go get them and to help them, and the women and the children, and men, of course, too. But to try to put an end to a detrimental. And these people are wonderful. Please, I mean, I think I was. I love my dad. I love my father. I love my mom. All we did was our belief system. But in the meanwhile, all of the things that are harmful, I'll get into more of that and more of the research on that. So these men went to prison, and a lot of them signed this to get out, saying that they would end their plural marriages, but knew that they wouldn't. And they made that kind of like the manifesto of the church, where they signed it and yet continued to live it. So they figured the manifesto, the LDS church leadership did the same thing. They signed papers and then they continued. So we're going to sign our papers and we're going to continue to do what God wants us to do. And so that was their justification and reasoning in that. And I just barely mentioned this about the, Governor Pyle's attempt to rescue children. In the paperwork that my friend did, she found many, many, many documents about rape, child bride marriages as young as I was just telling you, 8 years old. My sister, Lucille, was married and I put 14 because for a while I didn't have facts. Her niece, who's left the FLDS, my niece, her daughter, told me she was 13, and that's what I always thought. Someone else said she was 14, but she was 13 years old when she went down there to visit my grandfather, who the split had taken place, and they married her off to a man who was 28, 29, and she was 13. So they knew, and she wasn't the only one this was going on. The leadership were trading daughters. Who's that cute girl over there? Oh, that's so-and-so's. Well, I've got this daughter over here. I think we'll have a meeting. And this had been going on for a long time. And in fact, my father was wanted to take a plural wife when she got 16. Back then, that was a legal age. They were waiting, and that young woman was locked up by her father until she got a testimony that she should marry this other guy. So there's many, many stories I've heard over the years and personal stories, not just hearsay, by far. So I'm growing up in polygamy. Like I said, I was born and raised in it. By the time I was born, my dad had 4 wives. The third wife was supposed to be watching me. I'm the youngest of Mom's 8 children. Mom was going to work and taking care to help provide for Dad's huge growing family. And I completely was a latchkey kid, molested by brother, doctor, cousins. And I thought I was the only one. Most people who are victims think that. And you're threatened with your life, and you better not tell, and if you do, I'll beat the crap out of you, and blah, all the threats that happen. So I completely had this weird thing about God. It was like Mom would say, if you're a good girl, God will protect you. If you say your prayers, God will protect you. And yet things were going on. I didn't ever know. I ran away at 12 and was gone for 4 days before anybody missed me. In fact, they didn't miss me till I came back and the work wasn't done. So there were so many, many children without the care that they needed. And a lot of people say, oh, there's all these women and all these children to take care. Most opposite in most cases. And please don't think that everything I say fits everybody, because it doesn't. There are some amazing families who have amazing kids who are able to, they make the best of their polygamous beliefs and they make it happen well. But the majority of the studies and research coming from HOH, which I'll mention later, and from my research and from all the hundreds of people I've talked to who've left since I have. And so this is my father's family. He had 23 biological children. And then he continued to marry other women who had children, who came in to the belief system and or their husbands had passed away or they divorced, and he married other women with more children. And so there's 23 more children. My father had 2 more younger than this little guy at the very end that aren't here in this picture. And I was right in the middle, 12 of the 23. So I married at 17, and I had to find somebody who wasn't related to me, because by now, all of the fundamentalists were related to each other. I mean, we're talking generations of fundamentalists who haven't got very many converts, a few here and there, and some would stay and some would go. The majority came and found out what it was really like and would leave. Most of them came from the LDS Church by far because of the belief system, the original teachings. But they'd come, and we were all related pretty much. My brothers would have to go date girls and make them fall in love with them. And I watched this happen over and over. In fact, out of all my brothers, there's only one that's married to his first wife still. And the rest of them, the other women, came, got converted, fell in love, and thought they were converted and divorced and left. They found out the realities and how hard and crazy it was. But those of us who were raised in it, I feel like, I want to say brainwashed in it, that all of our lives were more indoctrinated, more convinced this is the way it's got to be. And besides pleasing our parents, the other parents weren't happy that their daughters were marrying, into plural marriage. So it went both ways. I found an independent man who there's all the group people, you hear groups, FLDS, the AUB, and all these groups that have been split off over these years. And there were independent polygamists who decided not to follow any specific leader. All they had to do was believe in plural marriage and Joseph Smith and live plural marriage. So they weren't really attending church. They didn't follow a leader. They are probably the most known to intermarry. Lots of birth defects. The FLDS have lots of birth defects and on. But at this time, we were told in the Allred group, it was nicknamed, or the AUB, that we weren't to marry relatives. So me and my brothers and everybody are trying to find partners somewhere else. And I met this independent man, married him, and we started our family. He believed in plural marriage, but wasn't going to follow my Uncle Rulon, who was the leader at the time. And we had a lot of, butting head about that. In 1977, the year my third son was born, my Uncle Rulon was killed. Does anybody remember that from Murray right in here?
Happened in Murray.
Happened right in Murray on 4800 South in his doctor's office. And two of Ervil LeBaron's wives went in and killed him. A lot of the media said rival polygamous groups, which wasn't true, at least in everything I had heard and believed and knew. My Uncle Rulon was more passive, and he would laugh about it. All the threats that Ervil would send, and he'd just say, he just thought it would never really happen. He wasn't worried, and he certainly wasn't rivaling with his group. At one time, they were all one group. I think I missed that part. They were all together groups right after the manifesto. And then, of course, they just over the years split over doctrine, over child-bride marriages, over a lot of stuff. And so he was killed. And then my father, who was next in seniority in the line of succession of priesthood authority that they claimed, took his position. And that really changed a lot of stuff in our house. So Dad had 4 wives, took the 5th one the year I got married, and as a leader, he just kind of went, what do I want to say, past it in trying to please people, everybody. He said he didn't want that position. He didn't feel that it was good for him to have it. He wasn't capable. He just never did feel. In fact, I remember all my life he was worried about that, hoping Uncle Rulon would never die. But he'd tell somebody one thing, another person another thing. He became very dishonest by people pleasing. It was do whatever I need to do to pacify everybody. And that never works, as you know. In this picture here, I'm going to show you a picture of the council members, of my father's and my Uncle Rulon's council members. And this picture here is one of the men that lived there. And he had his house. This is a picture. It's in Riverton. And it's the windows, and there's new people living there. But he had this house boarded up. It was dark, dark, dark in there. All of my life, there were 3 council members that gave me the creeps. Even they'd speak in church, in our church, and I would just couldn't stand them. And I said to Mom and Dad, I can't stand these men. They give me the creeps. I don't know why. There's just something really wrong. And later, we found out that there had been satanic rituals in this basement with his own daughters and with other daughters. And I'll tell you more about that. But this house always bothered me. I grew up doubting everything. One of my sisters said to me, "You were so rebellious." And I go, "I was? I mean, I never saw me." "Well, inside you were rebellious. You always questioned everything, and you said everything was wrong." But on the outside, I just went, okay, whatever. Dad's smarter. He's the prophet. Everybody's Mom knows what I just went along with the ride and tried to believe in it all. But inside, my guts hurt, my heart hurt. This is my father with 8 of the 13 wives. This is my mom right here, the first wife. The youngest wife at this time was Ruth, right over here. And she came in, and this is in my book, I talked about my aunt who was my favorite. And look how happy she is. And all of us did that. You're in a picture, and everybody knows they're supposed to smile. And so I studied this, and I went, none of them really look very happy. Oh, I apologize. This is Dolores. She's actually the youngest wife. Ruth rocked the boat, and she made it even worse. And so it's heartache. I'm telling you, it was really, really tough on Mom. And watching her suffer as I grew up and cry in her bedroom, and then she'd say, "It isn't polygamy. It isn't plural marriage that's wrong. It's me. I'm bad. I'm wicked. I just am not faithful enough." And and that's what we grew up with. I did the same thing. So as I'm growing older and knowing I've got to live plural marriage and I've got to help my husband find another wife, I know I've got to get over my jealousy. I can't be sad. I can't be mad. I can't hurt. Because that means I'm evil and defective. And so these men are the council members. This man is the one whose house I showed you, who was with his own daughters. He allowed them, we found out years later, to be abused by his own sons. This man, you'll read about that. And this is the current leader of the AUB right now. He's been accused by at least a dozen women of molesting them. And when that came out, it caused a split in the AUB. Some of them believed it because they kind of didn't like the guy anyway. He'd embezzled tithing money and things like that had been taking place, and they didn't believe it, and they didn't want to, they wanted to support the victims rather than support him. And he prayed to God. Lynn Thompson prayed to God, and God told him that he did not need a trial, that he was forgiven, and that there needed not to be anybody questioning his authority. And so half of my family and brothers and people still continue to follow him, and on it goes. And I know that all the women that publicly came out aren't the only ones, because a lot of them are my age, and they had told me and talked to me over the years. So they're just not brave enough to, say that to their families or other people. I found out after I left about more about all of this, that because when I left, people started coming, and I was helping and becoming an advocate and telling me their stories. And it was just heartbreaking. And I said to myself, somebody has to speak. Someone has to tell the truth. Someone has to write the truth and be brave enough to do it. And so I started to write my book, and it was really more than anything cathartic, because I had met my precious husband, and in Riverton, I was teaching there, had gotten my teaching degree, had divorced, and had met this guy, my precious Dub. His nickname is Dub, Leroy. And his daughter introduced us, and he was just so amazing. So he actually cried with me while I'm sitting down writing and typing and writing my story. And he was just absolutely, and he'd say, honey, sit down and write. And I'm like really go, go, go person. And so it was hard for me to sit and write. But I'm glad I did, because I put it on the shelf and I went, doesn't matter anymore. I'm happy. I mean, this is really, got it all out there. And so I was meanwhile meeting a lot of wonderful people and finding out that how happy I was and how free I was. And I love this part. I told everybody last year, I said, I got so many friends and women friends and sister friends, and none of them are sleeping with my husband. And that's really true, because one of the things that we women used to do is sit around while our husbands were off with their other little wives and the new wives and whatever, is try to convince ourselves of how wonderful plural marriage was. So we made up reasons of why it was good, and that was one of them. Oh, we have all such good friends. Well, I was never, and I've not really seen good friendships with hardly any of the plural wives. Now, you might see them act like that in public, because you got to go to church and look like everything's fun until you get home and the real things come out. And that's how it was with my sister wife. We got to meet. I'm sorry, I'm just so happy. I'm crying happy tears that we are really finally getting to be friends now that, we're all going our own ways and becoming. I always thought she'd be a great person to be a friend with. I actually picked her for my husband because of that. I thought she's funny, she'll make me laugh, and I love laughter, and she's energetic, and we can do things together. But as soon as they're married, my marriage was never the same. Hers was never going to be the same. You have all the conflicts and the real jealousy, and we didn't ever scream at each other, but we had our times. There's so much, we could talk for hours. So these are some of my very few precious friends. But as time went on and I heard more and more and more about the sexual abuse and the perversions that were going on, people would say to me, well, why is it so rampant in polygamy? Why is, it is, and it happens everywhere. We know that. We have this kind of stuff everywhere. We're finding in all the churches, Catholic churches, other churches, it's going on everywhere. And it's covered up everywhere. But statistics show that it's much higher in plural families. And remember when I talked about me being the latchkey kid? This is why. My brother, they had full access to me. These people did. Nobody's watching me. Nobody's telling me what's right and wrong and who should or shouldn't. And half of the kids are not being attended. And this is a perfect example right here. This picture coming up is my sister. I had a kid, a boy. She had a boy. I had a boy. Okay, 1 year I had a boy. She had a boy. Next year, I had a boy the next year. I had a girl the next year. She had a girl the next year. And I had a girl the next year. When she married my husband, I already had 2 boys, and she came into the family with a girl, and I had just had a boy. She decided she needed to go to work for her own sanity and to help support this huge family that my husband's growing now. And I'm the stay-home mom because I didn't have any education, and she at least had some secretarial skills that she'd gotten in high school. So we decide, and she decides she's gonna go help support the family, and I'm watching the kids. This is my job, right? Plural families, so she can go to work and do her career while somebody watches the kids. How awesome! The days went like this: get up, make breakfast, hurry up, feed the baby, nurse the baby. Here's a crying baby over here waiting for breakfast that I've got to hand feed. Another baby falling down the stairs, and the teenagers going, "Where's my stuff? I didn't get this done, and I need that, and I need the homework, and you didn't call my teacher." And I'm trying to put food on the table and get the kids off to school and make lunches and get them out of the door. And meanwhile, 2 or 3 of the babies right in a row, the kids, one of them's not there in this picture, the youngest. And it was really insanity. Child care, daycare ratios don't allow that. Not at all. And that's just a short piece of it. By the time midnight came and I could climb in bed and cry my eyes out because I knew my kids didn't get what they needed, and neither were hers. They didn't get the care they needed. They didn't get the love they needed and or any educational needs met that they needed. And this was God's will, so I had to keep doing it. Sorry. Well, that's just me. I'm emotional. This is my sister that was married at 13. And when Texas did what they call the raid, and I like to call it attempted rescue, and I hope all of you will just help put that out there, attempted rescues in Texas, my husband said, "Do you want to go find your sister? I'll pay for you to go." And I hadn't seen her and talked to her in probably 12 or 13 years. And maybe she'll talk to you now, because the new thing with Warren and his dad was that you couldn't talk to apostates anymore, and you couldn't see families, and they were disowning everybody and moving families around. You've probably all heard about that part. And so I went out there to try to find her, and that's a whole nother story that I don't have time for. But basically, they heard I was out there and that I'm out there to cause trouble, and that really I was there just to find her and talk to her and see if she was alive and okay. And so I'm standing at the gates of the YFZ Ranch, Yearning for Zion Ranch. They told me I couldn't go in, of course, and I see a car come, and I see somebody duck down, and they pull away, and CNN was there, and they were doing all these interviews, and so I got talking with them instead of finding my sister. That didn't happen. But I found out later that that was her, and she was told to hurry up and duck down, and they sent her back to Colorado City. I never did get to see her. Her health was really bad, which is another of the stats. She had 14 children. The average FLDS woman has between 10 and 16 kids. The average AUB woman has between 7 and 15. I think we figured 13, 7 and 13 kids. Our job was to have as many kids as our bodies would produce, and it didn't matter how unhealthy we were, how poor we were, how sickly they might be, how uneducated they might be. It was just our job to produce children. And it was evil to consider not having them. A woman should be happy to die in childbirth because she'd have her glory made in heaven if she did that. That was the belief system. It still is to many, many of these people. Not all, because people are starting to learn more and educate and starting to wake up more, but that's what you find a lot of it. I have 7 children, and when I had a hysterectomy to save my life, I had this nightmare that I was going straight to hell. I woke up screaming, that I was going to go straight to hell. Thank goodness I had a good, wise people that were out that were saying, no, that's not the case, and you're okay. I finished my book and started the Sound Choices Coalition, and the word harms we changed that to just say realities, to inform society about the realities of polygamy and advocate for its victims. Harms is true, but we decided realities fits everything. Realities is really good people who just have been born into generational and or convinced that this is what they have to do. Is polygamy really about choice? I thought I had a choice. Every day I'd smile and stand up and say, I have a choice. I can leave if I want to, but over is the gun. I'm going to die if I do. I'm going to go straight to hell if I do. I'm going to never have my children with me if I do. If I don't do what God said, what Dad said, what Uncle Rulon said, if I don't obey. It's always obey. And we know that the reason I chose choices is sound. If you look in the dictionary for all the meanings of that, choices, what that really means, educated choices. Choices that are not hanging something over your head with a threat. If there's any threat, that's not a choice. And I'm sure all of you know that. This woman right here is my dad's sister. She was married to the man over there. And this is during the 1953 attempted rescue. And the media took this picture along with a whole bunch of other happy families doing their plural marriage thing and showing the world and everybody how wonderful polygamy is. And one of the girls right over here, so this is my cousins, the kids are. One of the little girls has got a baby in the basket. I don't know if you can see it really in the picture very close. But she was watching the baby. Well, the baby's closer to my age now, and she told me that from the time she was born, her father was molesting them all the kids. This is one of the happy plural families. Consistently, the stats are really high. And again, not everybody. Please don't think that this is everybody in every family, but it's just high. And the reason is, like I said, there's kids raising children, kids. Oh, I wanted to say with those kids, every day I worried about my kids touching, even though we talked about it, you don't, but am I there for them? All I could do is get the needs done, the food on the table, clean up, change diapers, feed babies. Am I knowing what the older boys or younger boys or the neighbor boys or everybody's doing with all these little kids everywhere all over the neighborhood? No time to find out or check or make sure they're all safe. So I find out when I'm an adult that I wasn't the only one who was molested. Is polygamy like gay marriage? We don't have shelters, and we don't have holding out help, and we don't have people going there and saying, I'm out of a gay marriage and I need some, blah, blah, and we don't have welfare fraud with gay marriages, and we don't, and that's consent. And if that gay couple, male or female, decides that they're going to share partners, they both get to. You don't have a man who said, I'm getting all these wives, you don't get to have husbands. It's more equal. Bottom line is, whether we agree or not with gay, equality is what counts here. Is polygamy consent? What did I say? I knew I had to live it from the time I was born, no matter how miserable. In fact, my mom would say, the more you suffer and endure to the end, the more and greater your blessings will be in heaven. So when I'm crying myself to sleep almost every night, I thought, well, at least I'm praying to God and telling him I'm doing my best, and hopefully my blessings will be great in heaven someday. Can we legislate morality? As we see, it's done everywhere. And that's where I talked with Angela yesterday about this very issue. Everything we legislate is somewhere based on some kind of morality. And is there such thing as good polygamy? People say, well, Kristyn, can't they make it work? And I say, well, yeah, of course they do. They do it. We all make it work. If you end up in the hut or in poverty or in the hospital or whatever your hardships are, you make it work. You make the best of it. And this is what I grew up with. We're going to make the best of it. Whether I don't know where the next meal's coming from or not, I'm going to make the best of it. And if my heart is breaking because my husband's sleeping with other women, I've got to make the best of it. I've got to get so busy that I don't care and I don't think about it. And that means more kids. That's the best women thing. I got to have another baby. I got to have another baby so I can keep my head off of where my husband's at. And so, is polygamy about equal rights? I don't see how in any way anyone can say it's about equal rights. And what about religious freedom? Canada, and I'm going to bring it up now just because we're talking about it, and I've got a slide for that, went through 2 years of court and process, the most liberal country, and they decided that Canada said, well, gosh, we allow gay marriages, we allow this, I think polygamy should be okay, we should legalize it. They had people, after 2 years, and I could go into that forever too, there's so much information. But after this long process, Chief Justice Bowman said, no, he said, we see that we are inflicting on religious rights, but all of this other stuff says there's no way it will be legal in Canada. It's just too harmful to men, women, children, and society. Bottom line. So no matter how much we want it to be religious freedom, it's not okay. So, as we said, women and children commodities, sexual, spiritual, physical abuse. I wish we had lots and lots more time where Angela could share the chart she just brought in today and created. It's just absolutely fantastic. Oh, you know what? I'm sorry. I didn't even flip that one about that I was going over before. This is a picture I found in the FLDS website when I went out to Texas to try to find my sister. They had posted this child brides. These girls are all about the same age, going across, and one of the girls who left, who told me she was there when they were all lining these brides, these child brides up, said that the youngest ones were 8 and 8 to 12. This was a class where they were teaching the girls how to be sweet, how to prepare themselves for marriage, and blah, blah, blah. And so by the time they're 12 now, 8 to 12, training, they're going to be married. The cruel, in Canada, they talked about a cruel arithmetic. Trying to think of his name. The author of the book, Craig Jones. He wrote a book called The Cruel Arithmetic, and if you can get your hands on it, it's really hard to because it's not published anymore, and it can't from Canada. But if you really want to borrow them, I have 2 or 3 I bought just so people could read them. They're excellent. And it talks in detail about the court process that they went through about the harms of polygamy and where and why and what and how they found it. And Craig Jones, when he was asked to be the chief litigator, said, oh yeah, we've got this made. Polygamy's a right, a human right, a religious right. It's going to happen. We're going to make this. But over this process, he wrote his book because he saw the opposite. He found the opposite. He researched the opposite. People came into court and told him consistently. And these are some of the things that were brought up in court. That the cruel arithmetic says that 66, in a nutshell, 66% of boys and men will not have wives because the other percent of the men are taking all the girls and the brides and the young wives. The older ones, the more wealthy ones, the elite, especially the leaders, and they're going to take all the young girls and all the cute ones and all the ones they want. Their marriage age is driven down because of that. These girls are married, got to marry somebody younger, got to marry somebody younger. Depression and illness in women. I don't know, I've not talked to one woman who wasn't suicidally depressed like I was, who's left. I mean, now they're telling the reality in the story. Financial, physical, the resources. We know on one of the TLC shows that somebody likes to say, oh, the more there are to love, the more my love grows and blah, blah, blah. Well, we know that the more children, the more wives, the more resources, everything's divided, the more there is. The math proves that. And these are just a few of the things. They didn't even bring up the part about incest, about the intermarriages that are still taking place right here in Utah, in Arizona, every day, because there's not enough converts. It's the groups that are, and now they are getting together to try to get new blood. But how many generations of all this intermarriage and a lot of disabilities, a lot of handicaps and babies not born in. The welfare system that you and I and everybody are paying tax-wise is, trying to remember stats on that, and I should have looked it up before I came because I did have that before. Millions of dollars compared to a regular city. So you take a city, say Colorado City, because they're more condensed. And this is not now, this was about 5 years ago. That city, compared to the same size of city, let's say here in Murray, that's random people, welfare system goes here, was like 98% higher, 90% higher. And off the chart, I mean, just unbelievable. And the same with the disabilities, the child birth defects, the same with that. Oh, and accidental things. There's so much to tell you. Will polygamists, I better hurry. Will polygamists stop their isolating? No, because the main reason they do, one of the reasons they wanted it decriminalized is saying that then we can stop isolating and being afraid of all of you and blah, blah, blah. But the main reason I'm a teacher. I got to, thank goodness, I went to school and got that degree I always wanted. But When I was a young mom, we used to say things like, it's better that our children go uneducated than to be influenced by those evil people on the outside. And I'm almost ashamed to admit that now, that I really thought that and believed that. It was like, if you're going to be their educators, then they're going to be uneducated. I'm keeping them at home. I'm staying home. I mean, I'm not going to teach them. And that's a lot of, I went to public school. My dad did believe in education, but that was all. You get to school, you come home, you don't associate, you don't hang out. There was all the rules behind that. So once again, the families are a little different. Some of them got college degrees, very few, and many, it went like this for a while, and then it's just gone down like that again because of fear of being educated and leaving. And so the principle of plural marriage must be protected at any cost. And I probably heard that 500 times a year, and if not more. That's why the cover-ups, that's why the isolation, that's why so much of the keep sweet, just don't talk, don't tell anybody, keep the spirit of law, don't rock the boat. And we do know this happens in other churches and other places, not just even churches, but this is really big in plural marriage. This man was really proud of his posterity. That's a picture. It was in National Geographic. And I read the articles and cried because they're making it look like how wonderful this all is. The man was asked later who the kids were behind him, and he didn't know. But that's his posterity. He didn't know his own children's names. And has no clue who the ones are further back. But he just produced these families, and this is what God wanted him to do. And so I'm not going to take time to read that. That was really good, but it's just same of what I've been saying about the harms and the sadness and the realities of polygamy. That's if you want to donate to continuing to educate people. We've got free books. The coalition produced this one, and I didn't bring any. I apologize. We'll get some more. I'll bring some over. But it cost us $4 to print them, and we'd like donations if you don't mind at least $4, if not more. I'll bring them, and they'll be here when I come up to Salt Lake again. But these are free. These are mine because, like I said, they've been in the garage, and I want you to read them if you want to. This has got my brother's story in it. He talked about, he had 3 beautiful wives, and he talked about how miserable he was and how he wanted to die every day. He couldn't make them happy. He couldn't be with his children. He couldn't support them all. They were always sad. He had to leave one to go sleep with another one and knew she was going to cry. And they would fight, and sometimes were even physical fights. And he said how many times he just wanted to drive off a cliff and not go home. So it's not just heartbreaking for women. And I didn't even know how bad it was till I left, and he had left, and we met up and talked about it. Because you got to keep sweet. You certainly don't want to say something that's going to make somebody not want to live this way, because it's God's commandment. Anyway, we have time for a couple questions? Any? Or comments? Charlotte?
Just one comment. When Kristyn was talking about the case in
Canada,
one of the things that really struck me was that there's all these lost boys that cannot find a spouse. This puts them into a age-related thing where boys from like 25 to 45 end up in prison because they can't be domesticated because they can't find a wife. I found that to be really fascinating because it never occurred to me that that's why a lot of boys end up in jail is because they don't find wives.
Good. Craig Jones brings that up in his book. He said, and he did more research and study on that, just what Charlotte said. In the countries where they were only able to have one boy and the women, they were genocide, the girls were being killed. Now there's all these boys without wives, without partners, without somebody. And the crime rate is huge. And the boys are all angry. There's more rapes. There's more, on and on it goes. The whole society, we know, if you do your research, that men and women are born equally and all across the United States. The thing that only takes the men out is in wartime or in, like if there's a catastrophe, you know, that might wipe them out. But in that case, it might be men and women too. Maybe mines took men out more. But overall, all across history, the birth rate's like this. I have way more boys. In fact, everybody around me has got a lot more boys, and we're going, oh, where's all the girls? You know what I mean? It's like, and we see that happen over life, but overall, research and studies show that it's pretty equal. And I think that God did that for a reason. That's my opinion.
When you left, by your family, by your friends?
Not persecuted, but disowned. And my family talked to me, my siblings talked to me and were nice to me, but they didn't invite me anymore. I mean, say we ran in the store, I got a hug and I love you, and they were kind to me until I started speaking out. And when I wrote my book and started speaking, one of my brothers called me and raked me over the coals and said, my mom and dad are ashamed of you, and you're anti everything they ever lived for, and how dare you.
The numbers, how many polygamists are here in Utah currently? This blew me away.
Oh.
The numbers are, we don't really know, but.
Well, I don't really know either, because there's so many people who don't fess up. But in the primer that was Angela and I, oh, by the way, Angela, please stand up for a second. She's our new coalition director, and she's amazing and wonderful and precious and smart and way more outspoken than me. I mean, I could go on and on. I don't mean to embarrass you, but I'm so
cool she was already, right?
Anyway, I'm so grateful because I've been trying to back off her. Every time that we've rescued kids and women and men and they go back, there's so much hurt in this. And they can turn on you and victimize you. And I decided hurt people. You know, as long as they're hurt. And I've had so many times that happen, and yet we've had so many successes. And holding out help, we brought some brochures, if you can pick. They're local. They're right in Draper. And they're having a big event coming up. And if you can make it to that, it's fundraising they have helped at least 1,500, 2,000 people, and their numbers just keep going up and up who are leaving. And most of our money goes to them too in different ways and different functions, and we kind of support each other. Numbers of polygamists, I really don't know, and I don't know that anybody really does, but in the primer it said that there were about 6,000. And if you look in my book,
I think it said 30,000. I'm not sure. It's a really
30,
low
it
number.
was
It's a
really low.
number.
Maybe it was 30,000. I wanted to say like 60 or something like that. But my father, from the just 23 kids, has 252 grandchildren. Okay? Each of them, most of them, have been plurally married, the grandchildren. So let's say 250, say, let's just double that.
Who's the math
What's that?
guys?
Yeah, who's the math people? So let's say that's 500 all of a sudden. There's no way that one man and his council member their families were bigger, bigger than his by far. And so the numbers are low that you hear. And everywhere I go, I'm thinking there's people who dress as normally as you do that are fundamentalists. A lot of the Kingstons do. We did. We pretty much dressed pretty average and normal and going to public schools. I used to roll up my skirts because Mom insisted I wore them clear down to here, and that was when mini skirts were in. I learned to sew. I wore jumpers that buttoned right here so that when I left, they were skirts. By the time I got to school, they were jumpers, came up to here. Then I got caught one day. I forgot to put my skirt down. So any more questions or comments? Yeah.
When you left, were you able to take all your children with you?
Oh.
Or did you leave them? Because I know sometimes just if you're not educated, how you're going to support them.
So I left at 50. Most of my 7 were grown. I started leaving in my head and in my heart, as you noticed. By the time I went, somebody might really love me. My husband used to say, nobody's going to ever love you like I do. You know, that all these things that keep you there. Your set of problems now are just going to turn in all the reasons to stay. What ifs, the fear of going, and what will I do? And I still had 2 children at home. One was 14 when I was getting a divorce and went to school. One was 16, my 2 youngest. And my ex promised me he'd take care of them while I went to southern Utah because my credits would be more valuable there than they were up here. And that didn't happen. So I only stayed a year and came home and tried to finish. A lot of that's in there. But thank goodness my kids were out. None of them ran. And every single day, I just was talking to my oldest son the other day saying that's my biggest gratitude. Every day of my life, one of my biggest gratitudes that they have enough problems supporting two kids, enough problems with their spouses, you know, let alone all that goes with that. So I'm so grateful. Yeah.
I thought the divorce is not allowed in polygamy.
Some aren't. Some will not happen, and some women just go anyway. You know what I mean? It's like I was the legal wife. I think I mentioned that I'm getting to hang out with the ex-sister wife, and she was telling me just yesterday her process of trying to figure out how to explain to the system how she had insurance and benefits and looked like she was married when she wasn't, and she had my husband's ex-name. So, oh my gosh, I always wondered what that would look like and what would happen, and she was just like, whew, you know, how crazy and sad for the plural wives that try and need to go and leave, and what even custody for kids. That's one that I want to say really fast. It's not easy to leave. It's horrible to leave. People abandon you. The man, especially any abusive man, my husband said, I will not pay you 1 penny alimony. I will quit my job and I will sue you for alimony if you even try. And the men will take a lot of men, again, not all, will take their money if they have businesses, big business, many of them do, because it's a lot of child labor and their own kids, and they move them into somebody else's. When the wife goes to get custody or alimony or support, they have a house, they have a home, they have all this stuff, and they have sister wives to take care of the kids, and that woman's out on the street trying to figure out no education, no job, no money, and they've all gathered up over here in polygamy and lied about her being evil and bad and wicked and alcoholic and on. I mean, I was the slime of the earth when I left. Everybody believed I'd become an alcoholic, a prostitute, how's she paying for that? You know, and on and on and on it goes. So it's hard to leave, terribly hard to leave. I did it. I was desperate. I was going to die. I had to leave. Oh, by the way, those men that I talked about, they were kind of kicked out. When that came out, I went to my dad and I said, all those years that I told you something was wrong with these men, you told me I needed to fast and pray and get a testimony. And I said, if you're a prophet, if those men are prophet and they were called of God, then I don't want anything to do with it. And so that was my leaving. He just cried. He just sat there. You're right. You know, so thank you so much. Get a book. Yeah.